Which is, we're going to start over. Good morning. My name is Doris Heaston. I'm with the Nebraska Vietnam Veterans Memorial. And we are at Bellevue University Veterans Center doing Vietnam veteran interviews. It is Thursday, January the 26th, 2023. And I'm interviewing Robert Trosper. Good morning, Robert.
Good morning.
And tell us about growing up, where you're from.
I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska. My parents moved here when I was 4 years old, along with my two older sisters. I went to school here, graduated from Omaha Tech in 1956. On the 5th of June, the 8th of June, I was at Parks Air Force Base, California in basic training. I was in the Air Force for 13 years. I went to Vietnam in July 1968. At the time I was 29 years old, a lot older than the average young man in Vietnam. The average age at that time was 19 years old. I was an air traffic controller.
Where had you been before you went to Vietnam?
I was stationed in Puerto Rico, Ramey Air Force Base, Puerto Rico. And
anywhere else?
Oh yes, in 12 years I was after finishing basic training, I went to Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi, for aircraft control and warning school, which was I believe 8 weeks. And from there, I was transferred to North Bend, Oregon Radar Air Force Station. It was a radar site, and I was there from October until February 1957. Then I was transferred to Santa Rosa Island Air Force Station off the coast of California from March of 1957 until September of 1958. Then I was transferred to Kirksville Air Force Station, Missouri, and I remained there until that was in 1958 from 1960. Then I went to Semi-Automatic Ground Environment School in Kansas City at Richard Barr Air Force Base, and from there I went to Duluth Air Force Base, Minnesota, and I was there for from September 1960 until January 1962, and then from there I was transferred to Cartwright Air Force Station, Labrador, and I was there from February of 1962 until February 1963. And when I was getting ready to return from there, anybody returning from the North Atlantic was required, in my career field, was required to retrain, become air traffic controllers, because there was a big shortage in the military. From there, I went to Clinton Sherman Air Force Base, Oklahoma, and then I went to Keesler once again to go to school, just basic air traffic control school. And from the time of graduation, 6 months later, we had to be 5 levels, which was not a problem for me. And then I remained at Clinton Sherman until December 1965. And I was transferred to Ramey Air Force Base until I left there in 1968 en route to Vietnam.
Did you have a family along the way?
Yes, I was married I got married in 1959. I had a wife and a son. They were with me in Duluth and in Oklahoma. The rest of the assignments were pretty desolate, so either there was no family or limited. Being of below the rank of E4, I couldn't afford to have a family living with me.
That must have been difficult.
At times it was, but you learn to cope. It's either that or you decide to get out of the military. I had no desire to get out up until my return from Vietnam, and then I did get out.
Let's go back to Vietnam.
Okay. I arrived there on July the 7th, 1968. Flew into Cameron Bay, and I checked in there at the desk and told them I need to get to Pleiku. And they said, well, you're going to have to get your own self there. You can get a hop, and you'll get there. Don't worry, we got you're covered, so you're not AWOL or anything. Just as long as it takes you to get there, you get there. So I caught a C7 from Cam Bay to Phuket, Republic of Vietnam, and spent the night. This whole time, no one has talked to me except told me to get to Pleiku. I get there. They tell me they have nothing going to Pleiku that night, but tomorrow morning there's a flight, and I can stay in the transit barracks and overnight. So I went there, laid down, and I'm hearing all this artillery going off. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's, I gotta answer this. You may want to turn that off. This might be mine. Getting the call from my cardiologist. So I didn't sleep much that night, but just hearing all this noise, just all these explosions. Next morning I get a flight to Pleiku. We arrived there. We made a bunch of stops in between. I finally get there. It's in the afternoon. They pick us up. There's about 4 or 5 of us there, and they pick us up and take us straight to supply. And I'm wondering why we going there. And we go there. They give me a helmet, a flak vest, and the M16. And I tell a young fella, I said, I'm a non-combatant. He said, dude, everybody's a combatant here. Take your stuff and go. So I left. I went to the barracks, checked in there, and it was just ordinary every day, the same thing. We worked 7 days a week, there was no off days. The city of Pleiku itself was only on limits from noon to 6 every day. Each night, you hear all these noises, outgoing artillery, flares going off. It was all just real calm until August the 13th, 1968. I went to the club. Bunch of us after work, we went over to the club, and we'd had a few drinks. And came back and I got into bed. Because the next morning I had to get up, and we had to go to work. I had to go to work till noon that day. And in the middle of the night, I wake up and the entire world is blowing up. All I hear is things exploding, and it's close. I look around, there's nobody in the barracks but me. I'm upstairs on the 2nd floor. So I jump up, grab my flashbacks and my helmet, put up, and I'm just in my skivvies and a t-shirt, and I go out to go down the steps to go to the bunker. And right across the street from our barracks, which barracks were in a square, 2 on this side and 1 at the end, there was a road. Then there was a flight line was right there, and there was a hangar there. And right as I came out the door, that hangar was hit by a rocket, and it disintegrated. And I saw this flash of fire, and that's when I realized these people are trying to kill me. So I ran down, got into the bunker, and I'm sitting there, and all we hear is these explosions, and they're close, and we're surrounded by sandbags, and I'm sitting there, and every time there's an explosion, sand is running down the back of my neck, down the back of my t-shirt, and I'm sitting there, and I've never been so afraid in my entire life. It finally ended after a while, and as I was coming out of the bunker, the first sergeant showed up, and he wanted to know where my clothes was. I said they was in the barracks, and he said you need to have all your clothes on. I said the whole world's blowing up. I can die naked or in my shorts, but I wasn't staying in that barracks another minute. And so that kind of put me on the bad side of him for the rest of the time I was there. This became pretty regular. You know, you become immune to all these things. You know, every day is pretty about the same. If we had a few hours off to break the monotony, we'd go down into the Pleiku City, and everything was just. The buildings were all either partially destroyed or they were just shells of building, and there's all these people just moving around. The smells were a lot of different smells that I never encountered before. The people seem to be friendly, but you know, you're unaware of what these people, and everybody wore these black pajamas, regardless of who they were, women, men, they all had these black pajamas on. And everything I'd ever seen before was a Viet Cong had been in black pajamas. Those black little silk suits that they all wear. So I didn't know who was who. And I am still waiting for somebody to give me an indoctrination to Vietnam. To this day, no one has ever told me what to expect, what was right, what was wrong. Yeah, I just showed up there and went to work and did my job every day. And that was for everybody. I met a lot of people there, you know. Being older than the average person there, I didn't spend a lot of time with guys in the Air Force because they were all pretty young. I started hanging around with guys who were in the Army. The 4th Division was right across the valley from us, and they were Air Cavalry. And they were always flying helicopters, and they were there. The use of drugs was pretty prevalent all over Vietnam. They sent a team from the Department of Defense to do a survey at Pleiku. And after they completed their survey, they figured that 80% of the people there were using some type of drug. The other 20% were alcoholics. At night when the sun went down, you could walk around the base. It was like a cloud of marijuana smoke hanging over the whole base. That was the norm there for everybody. In 68 and 69, the prevalent drugs was opium and marijuana. They hadn't introduced the heroin into the country yet, but they did because they knew that was another way to undermine the U.S. Attacks were common, you know. These rocket attacks. You got so used to them, you know. It was just like the way we used to judge attacks was they had the mama sons that worked in the barracks. They cleaned the barracks, did the laundry, and did these things. Most days they'd have to really hustle to get them all loaded up and get them back downtown and off and unloaded before 6 o'clock. You come into the barracks in the afternoon around 2 o'clock and they're all gone. You're getting hit tonight. And that's the way we used to judge hits. You know, when the mama son's gone, when you went to bed, you went to bed fully clothed with your helmet hanging on the end of your bed, your flak vest on, and then you'd hear that whistle about in the middle of the night, that sssss, and that's incoming. And you roll out of bed, go to the bunker, and sit there and get pounded. And in fact, in our bunker, we had one of those small refrigerators full of beer. So while we getting beat up and getting rocked under a rock attack, we're drinking beer. You try to get the thoughts of dying out of your mind, but it's always there, and it never leaves you. They wonder why so many of these Vietnam vets have PTSD. You can't put a person through that kind of trauma day after day after day and not give them any help. You go over to the clinic, tell the doctor I'm having a problem sleep. Okay, they give you a prescription of Valium and so you can sleep, and some other drug so you can sleep. But you don't want to sleep too heavy, because after that night, that first rocket attack, getting drunk was out of my. I said that's never happened to me again, because my roommate said he tried to wake me up and he couldn't wake me up, and I said, that just shows. I mean, alcohol is not for me. So that's like everybody else. I started smoking marijuana because you're going to wake up immediately, and fear will sober you up right now, and you're able to function. Like I say, this went on forever. It seems like. But after a while, I started saying, well, this is, I need to see some of this country. So I knew people who were stationed at other bases. Like at the train, I had a friend down there I was stationed with in Puerto Rico. He was stationed down there. They didn't even have a base. They all lived downtown in hotels. They had no curfew. I mean, they could walk around the streets all night long. Play cool at 6 o'clock. You need to be off the streets. If not, the MPs are picking you up and you're in a world of trouble. But it didn't take me long to figure out that Pleiku City they never got hit. And I said, well, why would Charlie hit his own self? So I said, it's safer downtown than it is on the base. And I spent a lot of nights downtown because it was, I didn't have to worry about a rocket attack. The barracks that I lived in, it got hit one night. A rocket hit it, and it was a dud. It just came in and embedded itself in the side of the building. It was it's hanging there, and they came and defused it and removed it. And I said, that was so close. That could have wiped out a whole barracks full of guys, because it was a 2-story barracks. If it wasn't rooms, it was like little cubicles, and 2 guys to a cubicle. That barrack was filled upstairs and downstairs. It's like nobody didn't really care. You're like your cannon fodder. You come, you do your time, and you leave. When I was leaving, well, what happened was after me and the first sergeant had that conversation, I went in for an interview, and he asked me, "What is your re-enlistment intentions?" I've already been in 12 years, going in 13 years, and I said I'm undecided. He said, "Okay." So promotions came out, and my name wasn't on the list. And so I go to find out why. And because someone else who had made it didn't have the record or the expertise that I had. And I find out that my name didn't go forward because I said I was undecided. I said, well, you just made a decision for me. I'm getting out. And from that time on, I was just going through the motions, trying to stay alive until I could get out of Vietnam. When I finally did get out of there, I was supposed to leave on the 6th of July. this was when of 1969. This was Nixon's first planned withdrawal of 50,000 troops. I got extended until the 13th of July to be part of that 50,000. And those airplanes didn't arrive empty. They swapped out 50,000. There was never any slowdown in the war, or we trying to get our people out of there. Every day there's planes arriving, and every day planes going home, guys going home, coming back. But once was enough for me. So I got out and I came back, and we were supposed to fly to Cameron Bay, and they had a mortar attack that morning. So the planes couldn't land, so they circled overhead for a while. But by the time we got out, at the time was if you came back for a separation, you got separated the same day you got back. We got back late because the planes couldn't land. And then so we couldn't. I couldn't separate that day, so I had to stay overnight at McCord Air Force Base. Next morning, they processed me out. I've never had a debriefing about what had happened over there, how I felt about it. It was just I was discharged. They gave me my travel pay, and I caught a flight from Seattle to Denver, and I was supposed to, there was supposed to be a connecting flight to Omaha that night. This was on a Tuesday night, and for some reason they stopped. They said they didn't have enough service, so they didn't have that flight anymore. So I had to spend the night in the Denver airport. I met this soldier there, because as we was walking down through the terminal, and I saw people just moving to the side, to the other side of the terminal, to the other side of the hallway. And I said, what's going on? He said, he said, because the only news we got in Vietnam was the Stars and Stripes. And that was all propaganda. There was nothing about how dissatisfied this country was with the war in Vietnam. We thought everything was hunky-dory. Thought we would come back and be welcomed as heroes. Because then you didn't say you wasn't going somewhere. You got orders, you went. So I had no idea what was going on back here, that people hated us, and they were baby killers and all these things. I never killed a baby, and they were trying to kill me. I wasn't trying to kill them. All I did was land airplanes, and it gave me a bitter taste. Because I got back here, and I get here, and I'm trying to find a job, and I'm figuring that being a Vietnam veteran, that might give me a few points. I tried to get a job. No, I couldn't get any decent job. I ended up getting a job working in a foundry in East Omaha. And I was standing there one night, and I looked down. I had a callus in my hand. I never had a callus in my entire life. I'm dirty. And I said, what's wrong with you? You work with your mind, not with your hands. He said, you give those people 13 years of your life, you have nothing to show for it. He said, if you go back for 7 more years, even if you never even get promoted again, for the rest of your life, you're going to have a check coming to your mailbox. And so Sel said, we're going downtown tomorrow and see if we can go back. So I went the next day to the recruiter, the Air Force recruiter. They said, oh yeah, we'll take you back, but you're going back to Vietnam. I said, no, I'm not. I knew the Army and Marine Corps was down the hallway, and I knew where I was going if I went there. And down in the very end was the Navy. I said, let me go talk to the sailor boys. So I went down and talked to the Navy recruiter. He was ecstatic. He said, I never had anybody going to come from the Air Force to the Navy. And he said, man, he said, but I have to get you in before you turn 30. And this was in the first part of October, and my birthday was the 29th. So he worked to get me back, get everything done, and he got me in by the 28th of October. I enlisted. This was before I made 30. And he said, well, where do you want to go for orders and uniforms? And this is October. And he said, well, you can go to the Great Lakes, or you can go to the Philadelphia shipyards. This is October. I know it's about to turn cold. He said, or you can go to Treasure Island in California. I said, I'm going to send me to California. And that's where I went. And I went there, and I went to Treasure Island. I got there around the 31st of October. And I checked in there. I was a petty officer, so I didn't have any uniform, so they couldn't I just couldn't do any manual labor. So I said, all you gotta do is check in twice a day. And I did that from October to December. I got some uniform, and I finally got orders, and I went right across the Bay Bridge to Alameda. And I was supposed to be there for 2 years. And the Navy came up and said they were short of money, and anybody wanted to stay where they were, they could stay. And I said, hey, this is all right. The Bay Area, San Francisco, Oakland is this is all right. I like this. It's not cold. It's warm. And so I ended up staying there for 4.5 years.
What did you do?
I was an air traffic controller.
Okay, so it's still the same
job.
Yeah.
The Navy. That's when the guy was so surprised. The recruiter. He said, "Why do you want to go?" So I ended up staying there. And I watched the USS Midway. It was the first aircraft carrier ever home ported outside the United States. I watched it go out underneath the Bay Bridge on its way to Japan. And our detailer came through there because my chief there at Alameda, they were friends. And me and him didn't get along. It wasn't that I was trouble. When he asked me a stupid question, I'm going to give you a stupid answer. And he would ask me something and tell me, give me a report on this, and I'd write. And he said, you give me a 4-page report. I read it, and you haven't told me nothing. And I just looked at him and said, well, evidently, I'm not going to tell you nothing. So he would, so he told my detailer, he said, this guy came from the Air Force. He needs to go to sea. And he said, what ship you want to go to? I said, I want to go to the Midway, see, because I know it left, it had a full complement of people, and they don't just send you to have extra bodies. So I said, I ain't going. He said, okay. He said, I don't have a billet now, but as soon as I get one, you're going. And I finally ended up there, And then in April of 1975, we pulled into the Philippines for a 10-day import period. And the next morning, I was downtown, and somebody was beating at the door, and it was my senior chief, and he said, we got to go to sea. Come on. I said, can't you? He said, no. He said, I'm not going to sea without you. You're going to sea with me, so let's go. So they rounded up as many people as they could, and we pulled out, and we left a lot of people behind because they couldn't have to wait, because they decided they was going to evacuate Vietnam. We left. We went over to the South China Sea. We sat out there and made donuts for about a week off the coast of Vietnam, just going in circles. But before we got there, we left all our airplanes in the Philippines. We went to Okinawa, picked up a battalion of Marines and some H-53 helicopters. And I'm thinking, I said, well, we don't have nothing to fight with. We ain't got no airplanes. These helicopters can't do nothing for us. What's going on? And finally, they came in and told us that we was going to evacuate Vietnam. And we sat out there for a week, and then all of a sudden, in 36 hours, it was all over. We picked up 3,000 Vietnamese and took them to Guam. Before we got there, we went to Thailand, picked up airplanes because our planes was gone, and our flight deck was full of helicopters, because when that evacuation started, those Vietnamese were getting out of there. The South Vietnamese, they were coming out of that country, and they were just flying and landing on any ship. We weren't the only ship out there. There was a whole fleet out there of ships. There was other carriers, everything. They was just landing anywhere they could. There's a gentleman that he he came out, he was in a bird dog, a little single engine observation airplane. He flew over the ship for about 20 minutes. He dropped out a gun belt with a note in saying, "Move those helicopters, I land." He said, "I have my wife and my 5 kids, and this airplane is only supposed to carry 2 people. So, but in the back it's empty and it's nothing but canvas, and his 5 kids were in the back, his wife was in the front seat, and the Admiral's 7th Fleet was on board the ship, and our CEO told him that the guy, when they moved them helicopters, he said, if you push those helicopters in the ocean, you're committing career suicide." And our CEO told us, he said later on at a reunion, he said, he couldn't live with that, letting that plane land and that man, and he said he would probably get out the pilot, but the wife and 5 kids, because that plane, the wheels are not, they don't retract. He doesn't have a tail hook. And if it landed and it hit the water, it's going to flip over. It's going to fill up with water, and nobody's going to get out of it. And finally, he decided. He said, "I'll just commit suicide because," he said, "I'm not letting them 6 those people die." So they started pushing helicopters over the side, $20 million worth. And he, for what he did, he made Admiral. I saw him a few years later when I was stationed at Moffett. He landed because he was Admiral, and I was, but this time I made Chief, and I was the only one in the building. Everybody was gone, and so I had to meet the airplane because he was a VIP. And when he got off the airplane, he looked at me. He said, "You were on the Midway." I hadn't seen this man in 4 years. I've only saw him a couple of times on board the ship, but he knew everybody on that ship. But he was he's a rear admiral. He retired as rear admiral, and I belong to a veterans association, the Midway Veterans Association. We have reunions every other year there in San Diego, because that's where the Midway's at now. It's a monument in the city of San Diego. Got the Navy to give it to him, and I have fond memories of that ship.
Do you go to all those reunions?
Yeah, I'm a lifetime member of the Veterans Association. Yeah, I go. I didn't go during COVID because we were supposed to go to Norfolk, Virginia, but they canceled that for that year. And then the following year, they said because of COVID, we didn't have one, and they had one last year, but it was such short notice that I couldn't afford to go, because you got to fly there, you got to pay for hotels, you got to pay for food. I mean, the reunion costs, and then all the events that they have lined up, they all cost. So it's not cheap. But yeah, I still go.
Do you have any kind of connection with the Air Force, or your former Air Force buddies?
No, one guy who was stationed with me in Vietnam, I got a call one night. This was quite a few years ago. This guy called me, and I asked him. I said, "How did you find me?" He said, "I knew you was from Nebraska, and I knew you was from Omaha." And he said, "I went to the library and I looked in the phone books for Omaha." And he said, "With your last name, there's not a whole bunch of Trospers." And he said, "You're the only one in there. So I called you." And I said, "What happened?" Because he was engaged to marry a Japanese girl. I said, "Did you get married?" He said, "No, we never did." Said by the time I came back from Vietnam, she'd moved on. And no, the Air Force kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Because the things that I used to get in trouble for in the Air Force, the Navy kind of condoned it. I mean, because they know boys will be boys. As long as you can go to work and do your job, they don't really have, well, I can't say anymore because the military now is kinder and gentler. It's completely different than it was then.
Well, the statute of limitations is over. You won't get in trouble now.
Well, I mean, the things that we got in trouble for, I mean, now, everything is legal almost everywhere.
Do you keep in touch with any of the Army men you knew in Playcoon?
No, I don't, because, I knew them, but a lot of them I didn't even know their names, because we just see each other, and we'd all gather in this one place, and I'd see them. But I know that one of the guys I knew, I saw him one day, and he said, this is the last time I'm gonna see you. He said, I'm going home in 5 days, so I'm not coming off base anymore. I said, okay. And then I was asking one of the guys about a month later. I said, "Did what's name ever get out of here?" He said he got killed 2 days before he was supposed to leave. Said he was in the barracks. An LZ came under attack, and he ran to the barracks, just getting up a bunch of guys to go out and give them relief at that LZ. And they loaded a helicopter up, and when the helicopter landed, they had the landing zone zeroed in and blew it up and killed everybody on board. I said, he was spent 363 days and got killed.
What do you think do you think there's a lesson from the war in Vietnam?
The lesson is, which we have yet to learn, is we can't police the whole world. Every time somebody gets in trouble, the handwriting was already there. The French had been fighting over there. These same people, the communists over there for years. They got ran out of Vietnam. We go in there to be advisors, and end up, we weren't advisors anymore. We was the fighting force. I know we're supposed to be set an example for the whole world about democracy, but some people don't want to. They'd rather just have peace. Like now, the whole country of Vietnam is all communist. They say the country. I have a cousin of mine. He was up. We were both there at the same time. We were stationed real close to each other, but we never knew it, so I never got to see him. But we was right there together because there's so many people there. And he went back over there last year, and he said it's beautiful. He said the country says you never know that there was a war there once before. That's what we learned. We need to stay out of everybody else's business. We can't be separate from the whole world, but we can't take on the whole world's problems. Because old men start wars, young men die.
Did you have another career after your military career?
Yes, I did. I went to work for Douglas County Corrections, and I retired from there also. After I retired, for the first year or so after I retired from the Navy, we were able to live on my retirement pay, and then recession set in. I had to get a job, and the only thing I'd ever done since I left high school had been in the military. I didn't have any skills. I was too old to be an air traffic controller because that's what you go say. What they did, they set it up. Used to be guys would stay in the military for 20 years, retire, and go to work for the FAA. After they had that strike in the 80s, and Reagan fired all the air traffic controllers, they changed the rules. Well, the rules were changed before when I got out, because I applied when I got out of the Air Force, and I was waiting for the interview. I applied and everything. After I'd gone back into the Navy, about 2 or 3 months, I was at Alameda. I get a letter from him saying to come to Rhode Island for an interview. Too late now. I'm obligated to the Navy. I can't. And but then now they've changed the rules. You have to be hired by age 32. And so you have to make that decision. Are you going to stay in the military, or are you going to get out and hope you get a job with the FAA? Like I said, I went to work for Douglas County Corrections. I made lieutenant in less than 6 years. And then after that, it all becomes political. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I didn't owe anybody anything, and they figured they knew they couldn't control me and just say, do this because you owe me. I never, that was probably one of my biggest problems in the military, because once it becomes political, I'm not doing it, you know. You got to, it's just because you say doesn't make it right. And so I knew I'd never make captain, so I transferred to Douglas County Youth Center, and I was the deputy detention manager there for 11 years, and I retired from there in 2008. But nowadays you need 2 retirements and Social Security, and you're able to live somewhat comfortably.
Do you ever encourage any youth to go into the military?
Yeah, I do. I tell a lot of young guys, you know, it's not for everybody, but if for nothing else, you'll get to see a lot. You get to see things that you've never seen before. Like, I've been all over the world. I've been to Europe, I've been to Africa, I've been to Asia. I've seen a lot of different places, man. I've even been to Karachi, Pakistan. That's probably the worst place I've ever been. But you know, I've seen things that the other people never will see. Yeah, I try to encourage you. If nothing else, you can go in there and learn a trade or something where you can get where you can have not a job, but a position. It's wide open, you know. I wanted to be was a chemical dependency counselor, and everywhere I went, you know, you need a degree. So I go back to school, and by the time I graduate, I'm working at Douglas County Correction. I've been promoted a couple of times. I'm making decent money. I'm getting paid well. Counselors like that, they don't make a lot of money, and the burnout rate is so high. So I've never worked a day in my field. But I used to tell people, I said, but I see, I can still use that, because working in a jail, I have a captive audience. They're not going anywhere, and they can't slip. So I guess the military did get, I was good at my job at correction, because when I first got promoted to sergeant, the inmates were more happy that I got promoted than anybody else, because they said, at least you will listen to us. You may not agree, but you'll listen. And if somebody asks you a question, you'll try to help them in some kind of way. You know, it's not hard to do, because everybody locked up is not guilty. And I used to tell the young guys who work for me, I said, your job is to make sure that they're here when the courts are ready for them. That's all. You're not the judge. You're not the jury. You're not nothing. You know, just make sure, give them what they're supposed to have. Don't give them nothing extra. Just give them what they're supposed to have, and you won't have problems. That's the way you go through life, in fact.
I'd like to go back to the military, and this is sensitive, and if you don't want to answer, or if I'm stepping on toes, you just tell me. But this came up with another veteran, and not someone I interviewed. When you were in the military, and especially in Vietnam, did you run into racial issues?
Oh yeah, it was big. All through the military, you know. When I first enlisted in the military in 1956, majority of the military were Southerners, career Southerners, because, you know, the military gave them a chance to better themselves, you know, at least like a guy tell me one time, he said I never had more than one pair of shoes until I came into the military. And he's from somewhere down in Georgia or somewhere.
This was a white person?
Yeah, oh yeah, okay. You know what I mean? Well, see, in my job, I was always the token. because there weren't a lot of black air traffic controllers in either one, the Air Force or the Navy. I was normally just a token. And the racism was there. That's about for promotions, everything. You know, they would push other guys, you know, but I've learned at an early age in the military that for me to succeed, I had to be the best. And every school I ever went to in the military, I always graduated #1 except Sage School. And I was in a class with all officers, and I was #2. And I was upset about that. My wife told me, she said, you know, all these guys got degrees. You got a high school diploma from Tech High. So, you know, you did all right. I said, no. I always would. But yeah, that racism has been there. That's, well, this whole country is like that, you know. I often tell people that, you know, Nebraska is worse than Mississippi. In Mississippi, you know where you stand at. Either people like you or they don't, and they're going to let you know. In Nebraska, they'll smile in your face and stab you in the back.
Thank you for being open about that. Is there anything else you would like to comment about your military career, Vietnam, or anything else while we have this opportunity?
The only thing, you know, is I think I never did, don't ask me why I'm still here, why I never liked Omaha, even all grown. I couldn't wait to get out of here. And my mother said, you cannot, because I had friends that enlisted before we finished high school. She said, you're not going anywhere until you graduate from high school. Because I was 17, so she had to sign, so I couldn't go anywhere. And so as soon as I got that diploma, she signed the papers, and I was gone. The reason I came back here was when I was getting ready to retire, my wife, you know, she was still alive, and she told me that both our mothers are here. You know, she said, they're getting old, we need to be close. I retired in October 1986. Her mother died in March of 1987. My mother died in 1989. By then, I got a decent job, buying a house, raising 3 grandkids. I can't go nowhere. My last granddaughter graduated in 2005. You know, I'm about ready to retire from it again. So, and I was on my way leaving here this past year in 2021. I was planning to move into Florida, and I had a heart attack in July. And then in August, I had the bypass surgery. And so right now, that's kind of on hold, because I was very pleased with the doctors I had at UNMC. But I can't, it don't have to be like this. It don't have to be like this, you know. It's warm. It can be warm. I should be sitting at the beach wiggling my toes in the sand down in Florida right now.
I'm going to add that there's snow on the ground is what he's pointing to.
Yeah, that's it.
Do you have children and grandchildren here in Omaha?
I have grandchildren. I had one son. He died in 2014.
I'm sorry.
I have grandchildren here, and I have grandchildren in Texas. Yeah, they're between, because my son, he had moved to Texas about 20 years ago, because he said, Daddy, I can't do this no more. This is this cold weather. And he got down there and he said, once I got acclimated to that hot weather, he said, I'm fine. He said, but he was down there. And I have a couple of granddaughters down there and a grandson.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.